Dune Part 2 is, well, epic.
It's okay. I'm here. It's been a while since you've had one of those nightmares. Tell me, what was it about?
It's only fragments. Nothing's clear.
Look, I'm going to start this review off by saying that by no means am I an expert in all of the Dune lore, so there are many better videos than this one if you're looking for a deep dive into that, and try your best not to get upset with me if I ever mess anything up. That being said, I'm here to talk about the movie. I'm here to talk about Dune Part 2, the long-awaited sequel to Dune, which was originally scheduled to come out last November, but was pushed back for a variety of reasons, and it is here now. This film is, of course, directed by the brilliant Denis Villeneuve, one of my personal favorite directors working right now, and it's been amazing to see him grow as a director. Obviously, he's always been an amazing director, but he started with smaller narrative projects, even in French originally, then moving on to films like Enemy and Prisoners, moving on to larger projects like Blade Runner 2049, and now, of course, his essentially magnum opus, the Dune trilogy. Regardless of whether or not this ends up being your all-time favorite film, I think it is almost impossible to not recognize the technical genius and brilliance that we are seeing here. In pretty much every single department, I can only imagine how many individuals it takes to put a film of this magnitude together, but when we're talking about the sound design and mixing, the editing, the production design, the VFX, the costuming, the lighting, everything is done brilliantly. It is a technically amazing piece of work. I have to draw some parallels here to The Lord of the Rings. I mean, obviously both adapted from amazing pieces of literature and put onto the big screen. But really what it is this creation of a whole new world on such a grand scale. At no point in this film did I ever think that I wasn't on Arrakis, that I wasn't in this world that was being created on screen, in a similar way to what The Lord of the Rings has done. And if Dune Part 2 is essentially the Two Towers, I cannot wait to see what Denis Villeneuve has in store for his The Return of the King, which will be Dune Messiah. I think what probably jumps off the page most clearly is the cinematography here from DP Greg Fraser. While he's not a household name, he is extremely accomplished and is arguably the most sought-after cinematographer working right now. He's worked on films like Zero Dark 30, most recently worked on The Batman and The Creator, and he understands Denis' vision and has certainly helped bring it to life. I will say this film is worth seeing in IMAX. I saw it in that format, and 100% of the shots were shot on IMAX certified cameras, not actually shot on IMAX cameras, but that's a whole another discussion. Essentially what it means is if you go watch it in an IMAX theater, you're going to get a picture that fills up, that takes advantage of that IMAX screen. Greg Fraser has been open about his fascination and almost obsession with texture, bringing texture back to the big screen. He's felt that in recent years, films have lost some of that kind of, that nuanced feel, and everything is fairly soft and there's not that much breadth. But this is a world with enormous texture and enormous depth. It is an absolute marvel. It is beautiful to look at. Sometimes the story doesn't even matter because you are just witnessing so much amazing work on the camera. Some interesting aspects that I appreciated, they used a lot of long lenses with low light sensitivity, creating this very shallow depth of field at times, particularly when we're looking at Paul, obviously played by Timothée Chalamet, and I think this is interesting because this kind of narrow focus, in a literal sense, very much mirrors Paul's narrowing focus through the course of this film. Something else of note that both Denis Villeneuve and the DP Greg Fraser have spoken about is the influence of the environment on culture and wanting to portray that on screen. So obviously the clearest examples of this are the black and white sequences that are a representation of giddy crime. So to Denis, there's this subtraction of color to show their way of thinking, to show that they have kind of lost that color and that they have, in a literal sense, become very black and white. And Denis and Fraser decided to use infrared cameras to shoot these scenes, which is not super common in the industry, and essentially the effect that it has is it makes the skin look almost translucent or reptilian, which is the feel that they both wanted to represent for the Harkonnens in particular, but really just the feel of this planet becoming less human and more barbaric or beast-like, more reptilian in a sense. Honestly, you could take a 30-second clip of this film and dissect it for hours. There is so much depth, there are so many layers here, and I won't bore you by going into it more than that. Suffice it to say that it is gorgeous and it is fascinating from a cinematography perspective. That being said, you could make an argument that the score is almost as fascinating. Of course, the score here comes from acclaimed composer Hans Zimmer. He's known, for scoring a range of films, but particularly his collaborations with Christopher Nolan in the past. He worked with Denis on the first Dune, and he's back here for the second. In fact, upon wrapping the first Dune, Hans Zimmer composed 90 minutes of music, sent it to Denis Villeneuve before the second film even started production. Hans Zimmer, while not, I would say, equally obsessed with Denis, Dune is essentially Denis' passion since being a teenager. Hans Zimmer did also read Dune when he was young, 14 or 15, and he remembers the moment that Denis first approached him on the Warner Brothers lot, and he turned to Hans Zimmer and he asked, "Have you ever heard of the book Dune?" And Hans lit up like a little kid, and that was the start of this amazing relationship. What Zimmer is able to do is he's able to craft sounds that we have sometimes literally never heard before. He's commented on how science fiction films in the past, think Star Wars, think 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's this over-reliance on almost like this European-style orchestral music, and it always confused him. To him, we're exploring new worlds, we're meeting beings that sometimes are not human, but yet the music sounds very rooted in traditional Earth-like music, Earth-like orchestral arrangements. And so to him, it became crucial to create these otherworldly sounds, which he did times 1,000. The score here is released. You can listen to it on its own, and it is brilliant. And not just the score, but the sound design and the sound mixing. I mean, everything to do with sound in Dune Part 2 is, again, technically just brilliant. From the what you would think would be like the simple sounds of the sand, we're talking about dozens of hours that were spent researching, traveling to different deserts, and literally analyzing the sound of the sand, similar with the development of the sound of the sandworm. All of these different pieces of machinery, weaponry that are being used on Arrakis. This is all designed by the team behind Dune Part 2, and it is so incredibly immersive. So I've made it all this way without even talking about the characters, which just shows kind of the power of the technical aspects of this particular film. Of course, our lead, Timothée Chalamet, plays Paul Atreides, and his kind of co-lead, in a sense, would be Zendaya, who plays Chani. And I have to admit that I find it difficult to forget that I'm watching Timothée Chalamet or Zendaya on screen. And I found that to be the case for probably the first 2/3 of this film. I wasn't in love with the, no pun intended, the love arc between the two. Obviously, I understand the importance there and the relevance in the original book as well, but it kind of struck me as a little bit of a teen romance trope, but as their relationship kind of progresses and becomes more nuanced, I feel as though their performances also rose to the occasion. In the final third, Timothée Chalamet was brilliant, and I was finally forgetting that I was watching him play a character. It was much, much more than that. That being said, I wouldn't put those two performances as the strongest of the film. I thought that Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen was beyond captivating. Obviously, he's known for his character acting, right? He famously could not get rid of his Elvis accent, whatever. He was so good here, and of course, part of this is attributable to the brilliant makeup and costuming, but I never once thought that I was watching Austin Butler. I was just fascinated with this man's journey, what he was striving for, and his cruelty, and ultimately his passion and his drive for power. Similarly, Rebecca Ferguson provided, if not one of the strongest performances, potentially the strongest performance of the film, as Lady Jessica. Her arc is just enthralling. She has taken on this role with greater exposure to spice and ultimately becoming a Reverend Mother, and the darkness that she's exhibiting behind her eyes is amazing to watch, and similar actually to Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha, her drive is insatiable and it keeps you on the edge of your seat every single scene that she's in. Look, at the end of the day, this is a technically brilliant film. There were some complaints in the first part of the trilogy that there was not enough action. Here we have a ton of action. In fact, at times I almost felt the opposite. I felt that we didn't get enough time to spend building the story because there was so much to explore and so much going on. It was an enjoyable ride. You're never bored watching this film despite its almost 3-hour runtime. Is it perfect in terms of its narrative and its dialogue and its characters? No, probably not. but working with such vast source material is never easy. And what Denis has done here is and I know people aren't going to be happy with this, but he set us up again, this time for what I can only imagine is going to be one of the best ending films for a trilogy in my lifetime. It sounds hyperbolic, but what Denis has done here is he's crafted a world that can hold its own against the worlds crafted by folks like Peter Jackson in The Lord of the Rings. This is a film that should, again, unless there's voter fatigue, sweep the technical awards, and I can't wait to see what Denis chooses to do when he finally finishes this passion project.
He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it.
If you did watch all of that, as always, I appreciate it. Liking and commenting and sharing and all that does help with the analytics and whatnot. So feel free to do that if you would like. And also watch the next video that I post. Also appreciate it. Thanks.